Hello and welcome. Today we're going to talk about Delphi and OpenAI. I'm Geuze from GTK Software, and the topic of today is Delphi and OpenAI, a blessing or a curse. The agenda of this talk is divided into three parts. I'm first going to show you how to get started with OpenAI. This will be a relatively short part, as there's a lot of information you already can find on the internet. The second part is about the integration in Delphi itself, using the ToolsAPI. We go into some detail on how to create a Delphi plugin and how to implement shortcuts and forms in Delphi. And lastly, we will connect everything together and see what we can do with OpenAI and Delphi. And of course, we hope to get an answer if OpenAI and Delphi is something you can use in your daily life. Alright, just 30 seconds to explain who I am and what GTK Software does. I'm Geuze, co-owner of GTK. We have several teams in the Netherlands, the UK and in Brazil working for a variety of international projects and clients. Besides software development, we also do a lot of Delphi upgrades. And we have a Delphi Hero mailing list where we regularly publish interesting related Delphi content. Alright, that's all for now. Let's get started.
Let's start with a clear distinction. OpenAI is not the same as ChatGPT. OpenAI is a research and development company, and ChatGPT is only one of the tools they released recently, and one of the tools they get a lot of attention with. But it's not the only tool we're going to use today. The reason why we are using different tools is not only that we are at this moment not really interested in the chat functionality, but that we also want to integrate the tools with Delphi. And as of today, that's only possible with the paid versions. So let me first quickly explain the way the OpenAI tools are available. So you have the free version of the ChatGPT tool, and probably you played around with this tool already. But there's more available. As you can see here, OpenAI offers various tools to create images, to translate natural language to code, and to perform various other natural language tasks. And of course, everything using artificial intelligence. So the various OpenAI tools are available using a paid plan, where you only pay for what you use. So you pay, let's say, for generating an image or for creating OpenAI related tasks and do, let's say, grammar correction. The various OpenAI tools are available using a paid plan where you only pay for what you use. So as you can see, you can pay per image or per token, which loosely translates to 1 word per token. So the first thing you have to do is create an account. I already did that, so let's obtain our key. So here you can see the secret keys. I already copied this. And you can see the usage per key, so what you actually use. When you register, you get some grant or credit, so you can start immediately. But if you'd like to use the API more intensively, I'd recommend to add billing information. So now that we have the API key, let's head over to some examples to show you what you can do with OpenAI. So let's go to the examples, and here you can see what is available as an example. But of course, you can add whatever request you have into the OpenAI API. So what can you do? Well, here you can see some examples. You can classify objects or companies in this case, where you would say, okay, I want to have this response, and it will automatically fill in the rest of the items. You can translate SQL or ask for SQL. So build a query, and you will get the exact query. You can parse unstructured data. So there's really a lot of things you can ask. So let's go to the playground to see what we can do with Delphi. So the playground, you can specify an input using various models. So you can choose a specific model. The most advanced one is the most expensive one, of course. But you can see what works for your actual request. You can specify the amount of tokens you want to use. And as you can see here, I've created a function which returns a t-list of type string. And I asked the OpenAI to explain what this actual function does. So if I submit this question, it will come back to us with the explanation of this function. And as you can see, it's quite a nice answer. So you can also ask the OpenAI to change the function. So let's say we want to change this to an iList. I can ask change this function to return a interface list, and maybe add of integers. And if we ask this, then you will see you get a nice list, an interface list, and it even changes the example code in here. So that works really well. Okay, now let's go one step further and create a OpenAI connector in Delphi. And yeah, why not use the OpenAI itself to help me with that? So for this, let's use the ChatGPT functionality so you can see how that works. But basically, we could put this in here, of course, as well. So I'd like to program against interfaces. So let's ask the following. Create a class to connect to the OpenAI API, written in Delphi. And because I'd like to program against interfaces, let's add using interfaces. So we'll have to wait till until it's done, but it'll generate an interface, as you can see, to connect to this to the OpenAI API using Indy in this case. And of course, we could also ask to use the TREST request if we want. For now, I'll use this generated code. And as you can see, it's not quite right, because it's just a interfaced object, but the actual connection to the OpenAI interface is not there. So let's ask it again and a bit different. All right, and as you can see in the second example, it actually implements the correct API using HTTPS. It adds the required parameters. So this is the actual class you could use. However, there's an easier way of using OpenAI in Delphi. There's a nice Delphi OpenAI API project on GitHub, and you also can get this via the Get It package manager in Delphi, which provide access to the API, and that's the one we're going to use in our example. So here we have a demo project with a prompt button to send the actual request and a memo to display the results. If you've not installed the OpenAI library, you can find it using the Get It Package Manager, searching for OpenAI, and you can install the required library. Okay, so let's implement the button to connect to the OpenAI API. So we need an instance of the library. So OpenAI, OpenAI.create. You can paste the key right away when you create it. Of course, you need a key to connect to the OpenAI. So now we have the OpenAI library available. We can also use various functions within the OpenAI library. In this case, I'm going to use the completion library I showed you earlier in the playground. So I want to use the OpenAI.completions, and I can create an instance of that as well. So completions, OpenAI.completion. .create, and here we have to give a couple of parameters to provide a prompt and the maximum amount of tokens the system can use. So this is an anonymous procedure. You have to provide a params. And as you can see here, you can specify a model. We're going to use the DaVinci model again. You can provide a prompt and the, for example, the maximum amount of tokens you want to use. As a default, it's 16. That's not too much. So we need to add more or to increase the maximum amount of tokens. So let's first add a prompt, which is the text of our edit box. We want to add the model in here, which is the text DaVinci 3. And let's say we want the maximum amount of tokens to be 1000. So that is around 750 actual letters. So now that we have the completions, we can use this and free the completions afterwards, because we need to do that. Within the completions API, you get a list of choices back. So the input results in various choices. For now, I'll just pick the first one. So choice in choices. Okay, so we'll pick the first one and we'll just break out of the loop for now. So as you can see here, choice dot text is the resulting text. So we'll put this into the memo we created. There you go. And let's run this. So as an example, create a class to manage a company written in Delphi. So the system uses my API key, which of course I will change after the presentation. It sends the request, and if everything goes well, I'll get a response in here. Sometimes it takes time, depends a bit on how busy it is at OpenAI. Currently it's quite busy, so a lot of people are using OpenAI. But usually we'll get this result within a couple of seconds. It's now taking a bit longer. I'll just wait for the results. There you go. So I get back a T-company class. It adds a couple of private fields, and it even creates properties. So currently I can see it's only read. You could ask the system to give more info, to add writable properties or editable properties, to make these interfaces, etc. You get it. But as you can see, the basics are working. So now we can go to the next step, which is see if we can integrate this into the Delphi IDE. We do this using the ToolsAPI. The ToolsAPI in Delphi is the way to build additional functionality in Delphi. There's some information to find here at Embarcadero's website, but even better is this GitHub page with David Hoyle's updated version. All right, so our goal today is simple: integrate into the IDE the code that I showed you earlier to connect to the OpenAI API. So there are several ways of doing this, of course. You can add a separate prompt, for example, in a dockable form in the Delphi IDE, or interpret the code that you're typing. For this demo, we choose to activate the functionality using a shortcut and by typing in my question. So we start by creating a Delphi package for our plugin. So let's go to here. New package. Let's save it like Delphi con OpenAI. And what we have to do is add the design ID to the requires, because that's the only way you can use the Tools API from within this package. So design ID. There you go. Okay. Let's now add a new unit where we first implement the key binding. So I'll create a OpenAI.key. Maybe let's change the name because this one is already used by the library we installed earlier. So delphi.openai.keybindings. And save it somewhere. Okay, so we need to use the Tools API, of course, and the Tools API has several interfaces you can use. So if you search for key binding, you have all kinds of services, interface services you can use in your own package to connect to the Tools API or to Delphi, basically. So let's do that right now. The OpenAI key bindings is a class. You have the T notifier object, which you can use, and here you have a lot of interfaces. In this case, we want to have the keyboard binding. There you go. And we need to implement several functions that are defined by this interface. So these are the functions that we need to define. So let's say I paste them in here. And we can use the binding services now to add a shortcut. So add key binding. We have to provide an array of the shortcut, and there's a way of adding a shortcut. I think it's text to shortcut. So let's say we use Control Shift F7. This one is in vcl.menu. There you go. And the key binding has two other properties, which is the procedure that's going to be executed if the shortcut is pressed, and some flags. So in this case, we want to create a new procedure. So let's say bind, and we have to define this one, of course, and add nil, like this. So now we have to define the bind procedure. So let's do that in here. Private procedure bind. And I think there's a certain way of providing the actual notifier implementation, which we can find here. Let me see if I can find it. There you go. So this is the way of defining a procedure that gets called when you press the key button. So I'll just copy the parameters of this one, paste it in here. And I think we need to change this one to here. And add system.classes. All right. Oh, we got an error. Okay. So here we have the procedure that gets fired if you press this specific key in Delphi. So later on we will implement the OpenAI functionality in here, or probably in another unit. For now, I'll just, let's say I do a show message, dialogues. Key pressed to see if our plugin works. Now we have to do some other things to get this to work, which is implement the binding type, the display name, and the name. So let's say in here we say results would be DelphiCon AI, and the get name should be something like this. And we have to get the implement a get binding type as well, which is binding type dot partial for now. Okay, and lastly, we have to add something to the implementation and the finalization section of this unit. So the plugin will be initialized if you install this package. So let me just copy these two lines and paste them here. And we need to create a, for now, just say create a global var or local to this class to store the key binding index. And as you can see here, we need to say, okay, we want to create an instance of this key binding class, and if it's created and Delphi is running, remove the key binding from the Delphi services. So let's install this package and see if it works. I get an error. Let me see. Oh. There you go. So it's installed. And now if I press Control Shift F7, we get the show message we defined here. So as you can see, it's quite easy to add a key binding to Delphi. Now we need to do two more things. First of all, check if the key code is our actual key. So let me copy this to here. So in case our key code is the shortcut we defined, then we need to do something, of course. And we should set the binding result to handled. So this could be t binding result dot handled. So now we intercept the specific key we defined. We do the show message, and we set the binding result so that we have actually handled this shortcut. So the next step is to access the contents of the Delphi editor. So what we want to do is see what a user typed in, give this to the OpenAI API, and provide the results back. So let's first see what we can do with the context we get here. So the key context is a interface to several functions, and I'm going to use the edit buffer in this case to get access to the actual edit buffer in the Delphi IDE. And if you go down to the edit buffer itself, you can get, for example, the selection. So the selected text, you can add information or delete information. So let's first try that and see if we can get the information out of the context. So what we will do is, instead of the key pressed show message, we'll just show what a user selected in the Delphi editor. So if you go to context dot edit buffer, we can make use of the edit block to see what text the user selected. So let's say selected text becomes this, and we show the selected text in here instead of the show message we had earlier. And now if I install it and test it, you should be able to see the text that we selected. So let's say I do this, I press the key, and as you can see, I get the selected text in here. And that's the way we're going to use the OpenAI integration for now. So what I'd like to do later on is select the text, get this to the OpenAI, and replace the text with the results of OpenAI. But first we're going to change this a bit so we can actually insert text into the Delphi editor. For this we're going to use the context again. And we're going to pick the edit position from the edit buffer, and here you can insert, let's say, a text. So if we would say, okay, we add a test text in here, and test this, we install it again, we should be able to select some text, and it will get replaced by test. So let's say pick this one. I press the key button, and you can see the text I selected is replaced by this text. So now we can implement the OpenAI to be able to insert some text into our files. So let's revert this change. Okay. And here I have the form which we created earlier with the connection to the OpenAI. So if we copy this text and put it in a different function in here, so let's say function send request to OpenAI. We pass in a prompt, and we get a result back. We'll paste the text in here, because we need to add some uses. So that will be OpenAI. And that will be OpenAI.completions. And now replace this with the prompt and set the result to the text we get back. And finally, we're going to query here the OpenAI API with our selected text and place the results back into the edit buffer. So here we would say for OpenAI result is send request with the selected text and insert this into our editor. So install this. Probably we need to change some settings in here because we don't have a component available. We should provide nil to the class. We need to add the rest components, and it's installed. So now let's put a test in here just to see if it's working. So I'll ask the same as we did earlier, create a class to manage AT company written in Delphi. I select all this and I'll hit the shortcut. And now the system will query the OpenAI API and paste back the results. There you go. The only thing is, as you can see here, it's all on one line. So we need to make some changes in our code to make sure that we'll get this class on separate lines instead of all on one line. So let's first delete this text in here and go back to where we queried the OpenAI. So what we have to do is we have to split the result into separate lines. So say this will be text to insert. What we want to have is an array of string, and we say, okay, the OpenAI result. We're going to split this. And we do this for the end of line characters. There you go. So what we now have is a list of strings. And what we're going to do is insert these one by one. So for in line of the text to insert, do move this one to here. And say, okay, we are going to insert line by line. We have to add the line break as well, because we want to go to the next line. And the other thing we have to do is move to the let's one further. Edit position. Move. Let me see where I can. Oh, I have the option. That's why. There you go. Move to the beginning of the line. Because if we enter the line, then the cursor will stay at the same position. So you have to move to the start of the line and then paste the next line. So let's see if we can do this. So we now installed the plugin again. Let me add a new unit because then you can better see what's happening. We're going to do that again. So create a class to manage a company in Delphi. I select all this text, hit the key, and there you go. So as you can see here, we have a class for managing a company created by OpenAI, including the implementation in here, with some constructor and properties. I think it even includes a T-list, so we need to add some users here, but it even includes an employee list without me specifying it, and the system adds, or the OpenAI API adds some procedures to add and remove employees, currently based on strings, but you can ask this again and specify a bit more the type of class you exactly want to have. Now let's do some more examples before we come to a conclusion. So let's say you want a SQL statement to update a company. You should be able to add it in here. So write a SQL to update the address field of a company. We select all this and we hit the key again. And there you go. So that's an easy one. But let's see if we can change some other things in here. So let's say we want to rewrite this, and for this part we want to extract this to a function. We could simply say rewrite this code to a function returning a choice text. Select this all again, hit the key, and there you go. Well, you see a couple of errors in here, so there are some enters, but that's something has something to do probably with our implementation right now. But this is a function you could extract. It'll accept a completion and it returns a string. And as you can see here, it replaces the result with the choice pin text. So it does work. Now for our last example, let's add a new unit again. And let's say we want to create a class to connect to Gmail to retrieve emails, again written in Delphi. We execute the shortcut and let's see what the system comes back with. There you go. Right, so it creates this Gmail connection. It uses the string list, so we should use sysutils. Oh, have to put it on top. Classes. It adds the implementation, and I'm not quite sure if the code compiles. Probably not, because there are some errors I think in here. But for now you get an idea of what you can do with the OpenAI connection we have. So let's go back to the slides and wrap things up. So we've built a Delphi package so we can use the OpenAI API from within Delphi itself. I don't have the time to show you more examples of the integration, but I'm really looking forward to your suggestions on how to use this in your daily life. Let me share my findings so far. OpenAI is very useful to create skeletons for classes to create proof of concepts, connecting to various APIs, as I've showed you, and to help you in creating functionality within your application. I've used the AI for various tasks, and most of the time it's just faster than Googling something. But it also has its limitations. OpenAI can very convincingly create complete nonsense. Several times I've asked something to OpenAI, got a very nice interface class back, but with non-existing Delphi calls. And then the fun begins, because suddenly you have to debug code that has been written by some tools who can make beautiful mistakes. So if we have time at the end of this session, maybe I can show you some of these examples. So, what is it? A blessing or a curse? I'm not sure yet. The future will tell. But with the progress being made, I think our job as developers will change, and we will increasingly ask for the help of AI. In the end, it will help us to develop faster. So, that's it. Thanks for being here. I think it's now time for Q&A.
Yes, it is time for Q&A. Excuse me. Oh dear. Just as soon as I go live, my voice doesn't work. Actually, Marco can't be with us. He's traveling. This was a redo of a previous session. And I personally specifically asked for this session because I saw it before in a previous camp that we had, and I was blown away. He's such a great speaker. It's such a great demo expert already. And I have to say, one of my colleagues, I'm not going to say who, but one of my colleagues is in the private chat watching along with this, and he's watching along because he wanted to get some tips out of this particular demo, because we're all very impressed with it. It's actually he does some very sort of straightforward stuff, but actually some of the things he does is non-obvious. And I also like the fact he said the thing about ChatGPT is it makes beautiful mistakes. And that's the thing that when you talk about a blessing or a curse, I personally believe that we're on the edge of a very exciting time. It's a bit like the 90s and the 80s, when the IBM PC came out and people started getting home computers and things like that, and Apple and Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak really, made us accessible. That was one key point in my life anyway, and then consoles, and then Windows, thanks to Xerox PARC and all the rest of it. That was another point where we started having graphical user interfaces that stopped things being blocky and horrible. And then the internet, I remember seeing someone just demonstrate ADSL, as it was at the time, in Cbit, when at the time the only thing you could do was dial-up internet. And I was amazed at how incredibly fast ADSL was. Now I have a fiber connection at my house, which is 1 gigabyte up and down. And actually, they've just told me the other day I can get 5 gigabyte up and down. And if I pay a little bit extra, I can get 10 gigabytes up and down, which is ridiculous. It's incredibly fast. And those speeds would be unimaginable again. So that's another inflection point. But this year, 2023, the major inflection point really is that AI has really come to pass. And my colleagues have embraced it. You see these graphics, that side that I'm pointing to now. These graphics were originally visualized as a result of someone who knew what they were doing with AI, and I think it was Stable Diffusion or something like that, my colleague said. Now, we did use Graphic Designer after that to make the rest of this slide that you see behind me up there, and obviously these kind of logos and things like that as well. So what we did was we used AI as a starting point and then built on top of it. So we knew we wanted like a vaporwave aesthetic, that kind of cool purpley pinky thing. But it was AI enhancing our abilities. And in fact, one of my colleagues has said to us before, we should all be using AI to enhance our capabilities. And I said in a previous link like this that I was skeptical at first. I thought, no, but you know what? ChatGPT and all other big, large language models, they're really capable. I did some stuff yesterday, the other day, and I used Bing's ChatGPT integration, and it gave me answers like that straight away. The answers were absolutely right. I had to do a very complicated SQL query to fix something on a server somewhere. I'm an expert at MySQL. That's one of the things I've got very strong skills in, and I advise other people how to use and configure MySQL. Now, I knew how to do the query, which helped me ask good questions to get good answers from ChatGPT. But it actually gave me a very good workable query instantly. I mean, within a second. And I was able to take that query and tweak it a little bit because it wasn't quite right, but it was close. And it fixed the problem for this particular customer, which had thousands of employees that they needed to do something for. And that was an example of someone who's been in the industry for 38 plus years, probably more than that now. I'm very experienced at SQL and databases and programming in general. I can program in 9 or 10 different programming languages competently, and well, hopefully. And ChatGPT gave me an answer, and I didn't feel threatened by it. It just gave me a good answer to a question where I said, hey, be my peer programmer and give me an answer to this query so I don't have to sit down for an hour and work it out. Saved me an hour's worth of time. So definitely worth it. And if you scan this, you'll go to Marco's website and GTK software. He does lots of if he's got a newsletter on there, I definitely recommend excuse me, I definitely recommend subscribing to his newsletter. His newsletter is amazing. It's if you're into development, software development, and you like it as a thing, which is what I do. It's my passion and my job. I get paid to do my hobby every day. Basically, I get up every day, write code, and I get paid quite a bit of money for it. And I listen to music and bang away on the code. But if your passion is software development and you're thinking about getting into software development, I definitely recommend scanning that QR code and going to his website, because subscribe to his newsletter, because his newsletter is it covers all sorts of topics, and it's Delphi focused, but also development focused. And I think GDK software, I think he's the G in GDK, and they just opened a branch in Brazil. And I noticed on the buildings outside, it said Delphi specialist in big, 2-foot high letters. These guys are proud to be developing with Delphi, and they make no bones about telling anybody about it. So, well done to them. They're tech partners and MVPs, and I really think they know their stuff. I'm very impressed, and I'm not the only one at Embarcadero that thinks that. I know plenty of people who said before they got a lot of respect for them. So that's GDK and Marco. So I also tagged some questions. Let me just change a few other things around. So people are scanning the QR code, so I'll leave it up there for a while. So the questions that we got that I saved was Gabe, who's been with us all day. I can't pronounce that handle, so I'm just going to assume it's Esikosis. I don't know. And he's not saying nice, he's saying nice. He liked the demo, or she liked that demo. I thought that was good. And Gabe asked a question, which I actually answered in the chat as well, which is, would it be possible, instead of using the API for OpenAI, to somehow integrate a ChatGPT web version? It's one way of doing it, not a very efficient way of doing it. Sorry, my dog is under my desk being noisy. You could do it using a T-Web browser or T-Edge browser component and host it in that way. But I think that's losing the functionality, because what you're doing there is just like a mini web browser. What's the point? I mean, yes, you could pop up a window and do it that way, but it would be a lot more efficient to do it with an SDK and then output to a window the results, if that's what you wanted to do. I know Marco was doing an add-in, and he was using the OTAPI, as it's called, the Open Tools API, to interface into the actual Rad Studio editor, code editor, because he had a specific purpose for doing that. But you could be, doing all sorts of things with AI. You'll see some sessions. I think, the last one today is about stable diffusion, and that's from Eli from FMX Express. And he's got another one tomorrow, has he? No, he hasn't actually, but there is another one to do with AI tomorrow as well, I think. I don't see it, but Eli has got a lot of examples, and he's got this Code Droid app, which is mind-blowing. And what it does, it does all sorts of clever things. You'll see a session. If you haven't seen it already, you'll catch it on the replays. If you want to get the replays, then the best thing to do is to scan this link. By Friday, I'll be able to point at it without thinking. Scan this link and register if you haven't already registered. And what will happen then is you will get an email summary of all the sessions. We'll tell you what sessions are coming up, but we'll also, more importantly, is send you an email with all of the replays, both for the entire day and also for the individual sessions as well. So you can pick and choose. You don't have to sit through 7 hours or 8 hours of sessions. It will just include the ones you want. So I suggest you do that. Scan along. Let's have a look. We had some other questions as well. Oh, someone scanned the barcode, so they're obviously paying attention. Good. And if you don't want to scan the code, then you can actually do this, which is down at the bottom of the screen, which is go to that website and just click on the register button. We're not going to spam you, but we will send you some emails. But the emails will be about this bootcamp and about Rad Studio as well. Embarcadero, who are my employers, as you can see from my shirt, are sponsoring this conference. So they do get a little bit of pushback because they're sponsoring things. They pay for all the time of the people who are paid participants, and they pay for all the streaming and all the hosting and all the other things as well. So, bit of give and take. So let's have a look. Oh, and the other thing, and I must say this as well, because it's actually quite a lot more important than you think. If you're on YouTube, please hit the like button, the thumb up, and then go across. I think it's this side, and there's a little bell. Hit the bell and say yes to get notifications. The reason for that is if you miss any emails or you prefer not to get emails, what will happen is that by hitting on that little bell button, you'll get notified by YouTube when we do these live broadcasts again, because we move them around and we're not always predictable. But the biggest problem we have is people go, oh, I missed it. I didn't know it was on, because of the time differences. Even in the United States, we have 5 or 6 time zones. And so we're a distributed company. I'm based in Texas, and so is the salespeople. But some of the other people are based in, the East Coast, the West Coast, and through other places. And so there's a couple of hours difference, and it gets a little bit tricky to work out what time something's starting. So if you do click on that like and subscribe button, the algorithm will actually notify you when it's going to happen in advance and suggest videos as well. So if you've missed one, it will actually say, hey, what about this video from Learn Delphi? The one that's about AI. So it's not just for our benefit to make us feel good. It does make us feel good if you like it, but it also helps make sure that you don't miss something important that you might want. We're trying to be useful. We're not trying to just be a, buy Rad Studio, it's great. We're trying to show you why it's worth having. So I've got a couple of minutes left. So I would like to just address a couple of the questions, because there were a couple that were quite important. We already talked about the web one. The other one was where can you get the example code? Go to Marco's site, which I showed you earlier on, which is GDK software, or just scan that for GDK. But it's GDK, the word software.com. So it's not difficult. Go to that site, and his example code is there, and also his newsletter and all the rest of it. And we talked about, Yes, someone else asked about is it possible to interface with other things other than OpenAI? Are there any other plugins? If you've got RAD Studio, if you go into Tools and then Get It Package Manager and type in AI, you'll be offered, I think there's 3 in RAD Studio 11. There's 3 plugins for it, and it was there's a lot there. This questions are G4224T sounds very much like that, some kind of like hacker handle. I know your stuff. I used Turbo Pascal and Delphi in the mid-90s. I've been using C# since and have just returned to Delphi. Hey! Oh, scared my dog. Hooray! I'm glad you did that. C# is actually a language that was invented by Anders Hallsberg, who was the guy that invented Delphi. Or he was one of the guys that invented Delphi. So they do share some similarities. I personally think C# is more complicated. And he said, he or she said, ChatGPT helped me get an app up in FMX in 20 minutes. I couldn't do that in .NET MAUI, which is the C# thing. And it's a testament to Delphi and AI. This is exactly the point I keep making. And it's so frustrating that people will struggle through with a horrible experience trying to create multi-platform apps with packages that are just absolutely abysmal when they could do it in RAD Studio. And it's like that. It's so simple. I'm a lazy programmer. I don't want to work hard. So I use a tool that makes it easy for me. And that's RAD Studio with Delphi. So thank you very much for, I think it's producer Martha or one of my colleagues picked that question up because I missed it. But I'm very glad you came back to Delphi. I personally think it's the right idea.